Hello and welcome to Books Are Great. I am your host, Jeff Brandwine, and I'm here with my co-host, Joe Arco. And today we are going to talk about the valuable ideas inside the book, Awaken the Giant Within, which was written by Tony Robbins and published in 1991. As the premise of the show, I have not read the book, and Joe has. So, Joe, start us off and tell us a little bit about what the book is about.
Sure. So thank you for the introduction, Jeff. There's a lot to cover here. Tony Robbins, as you said, wrote this in the early 90s. This book is going on 550 pages. If you count the notes, it's about 500 pages of content. There's a lot in here. And I just want to start off a little bit by talking about Tony Robbins. I just want to take a minute to talk about his background and where he came from, and because I think there's a lot of preconceptions, whether good or bad. Some people have these ideas about him, and he's this amazing guy, and he can change everybody's life at the drop of a hat. And then some people think he's a charlatan, and he's just doing this to sell books and to sell courses and to make money. And obviously, the truth is somewhere in the gray. He started off working for a man named Jim Rohn, who was a very similar person. He was a life coach and a speaker and an author. And he started working for Jim Rohn when he was 17. And he went from there to doing some work with these guys in a field called neuro-linguistic programming. Are you familiar at all with NLP? They use NLP as their acronym. We'll talk about that a little bit today. Hopefully it's something we'll address in a bit more depth later on in the show. In the long run, we'll do an NLP book or two. So that's really kind of a field of hypnosis almost. It started out with hypnosis, and then it was like, how do we, to make it really reductive, how do we use language in order to change people's minds or change them inherently? How do we convince people to move towards positive change is kind of a really reductive way of putting that. So he went from that to, writing and speaking, and obviously grew his empire to where it is today. And this is his second book. I believe his first book is Unlimited Power, which is about the same size, also a huge book. And this is Awaken the Giant Within. He's got this kind of brand. Unlimited Power is a reference. What he means by power is the ability to act. So okay, I know that I should be doing this thing, but I can't get myself to do it. That's a lack of power. Mm-hmm. Obviously the opposite being like, okay, I know I should do that, so I just do it, plain and simple. So this book is really, it's a compilation of a lot of different teachings. It's got some NLP stuff in there. It's got some life coaching stuff in there. It's got some, goal setting stuff in here, and everything's got an acronym. It's a very stereotypical early 90s self-help book, but there's just so many good tactics in here. There's so many good tips and tricks, and we've talked about this in the past as well. And this is the last thing that I mention before I jump into the book here. Most of the self-help literature that you and I have discussed on this show has been about improving yourself, making yourself a more virtuous person, and trying to live your life the best way that you know how. And I think that's the best way to do it. I think easy peasy to decide that making myself a more virtuous individual is the best way of going about improving the way that my circumstances are, right? We're all talking about how do I get the nice car and the nice house, and how do I worry less about money and all these things. Most of that comes from just being a good person, just being the person that you should be, taking the power that that you have to act in the way that will best create the life that you desire. A lot of this is not that wholesome. And I don't mean it's not wholesome. I just mean it's more tactical. It's more like a tips and tricks almost. It's like it's a collection of blog posts before there was such a thing as a collection of blog posts. He jumps around to all these different areas. And I just wanted to preface it by saying that we've kind of derided some of these ideas on earlier shows, and we've talked about the importance of just being the best person that you can be aside from tactics. But this book is about what can you do in order to create change in your life, in order to be the best human being you can be. And it covers, decisions, and it covers beliefs and values and neuro-associative conditioning, which is something that you'll learn about. It talks about what questions you ask yourself in the morning, what words you use to describe the world around you, and how your emotions affect your actions and what you can do about those. How do you properly set goals, and in what areas do you set your goals? He talks about a quick, like a mental diet, basically, that you can do to kind of reset some of your thinking. And then he's got not only like a 7-day, like, okay, now you understand the principles, here's what you should do for 7 days if you really want to adhere to these, but then he's also got what he calls a master system, which is basically an infographic before there was an infographic. It's just, a picture that kind of takes all of these ideas and, puts them into one image. So we're going to jump around a ton as he does. I'll try to stay in order, but that's what this book and that's what Tony Robbins is about.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
So I'm going to jump in with the beginning where he starts, which is decisions. Decisions. And you and I have talked about decisions quite a bit in our personal lives and how important they are and what they do. And, he's talking about decisions as he actually talks about the etymology of the word decision, which is to cut off, from the Latin. It's to remove from, right? So I'm going to remove myself from any other possibilities than this, and how important that is in creating change. And if you don't make the decision to change, then that's the first step. And if you're kind of, he calls it leverage on yourself, if you're kind of wavering about whether or not this change is something that you want, if you have not yet decided that you're going to enact that change, it's an exercise in futility, right? There's no point in doing any of this. So he says, if you want to harness the power of decisions, you have to remember the true power of making decisions. So you can use decisions to change your life at any point in your life. You could decide right now, I'm never going to drink alcohol again. And for better or for worse, that's going to change your life. And if that was really a decision that you made in this moment, for the rest of your life, you just changed your life. Right? So you have to understand the true impact of making a real, concrete, can't go back on it decision. The hardest step in achieving anything is making a true commitment. He says, it's not like I'll decide to do this kinda. Then it's not a decision, according to Tony. Make decisions often, he says. So, the more decisions you make, the better you're going to get at making decisions. And if it's just you're practicing, I decide that for the next 30 days I'm not going to drink alcohol. That's a decision. And as long as you practice sticking to your decisions, it gets easier and easier to do so. Learn from your decisions, stay committed to your decisions, but be flexible. Enjoy making decisions, I think, is an important thing as well. So he's really just kind of teeing up this whole book by, this is almost hypnosis, as he's telling you to decide. You need to make more decisions in your life about where you want it to go and what sort of life you want to have. And I'm going to teach you, how to direct yourself. I'm going to teach you some tips as far as what your emotions are going to do to try to derail you and all these other things. But unless you're ready to decide to improve, put the book down right now. That's where he starts. Chapter 1 is decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's, I feel like with Tony Robbins, I feel like what he does and what he sells himself on, though, and I think he's kind of doing it without doing it, and he's just writing the 500 pages. It's just like it just comes down to the feelings of the people, and that's what he's really selling people on, is like making them feel better.
Yeah, he calls that states, emotional states, or physical states. It's a state, and he doesn't talk a lot about states in here. He does mention them, especially in neuro-associative conditioning. States is kind of the thing that he picked up from neuro-linguistic programming, which is, the words that you use to describe a situation are going to affect the way that you feel about that situation, which affect the way that you're going to interact with that situation, which affect the outcomes that you're going to receive from interacting with that situation. So you can go back and say, okay, well, change the words and you can change the outcome, if you look downstream there. And so, he talks a lot about state and how important that is and what you can do to change it and how that's going to affect your outcomes. And he talks about even goals. When you're talking about a goal or a belief or a value, you're really talking about a means to a state. So if you say, like, I really value, and this is getting ahead, but this is good. If I say I value family, he'll talk for a while and say, well, why do you value family? What do you think when you think about family? What does that bring to you? And then you really probably end up at the word love.
Mm-hmm.
You really probably end up at the feeling that you get from thinking about your family, from being with your family, from arguing vehemently with your family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it really is the state that he's selling. It's the state that he's trying to get you to. It's the state that he's trying to get you aware of. That really is at the heart of everything that he teaches. Is it really what humans desire? And this goes perfectly to chapter 2, and this is chapter 2, is the force that shapes your life. Is every single person is driven by two things: avoidance of pain and approaching pleasure. In everything that you do, every decision that you make, whether conscious or otherwise, to be over reductive about it, if you're trying to lose weight and you can't get yourself to lose weight, it just means that you associate more pleasure to eating the pizza than the pain of being overweight or the pleasure of being a healthy weight. Right? There's more pain associated with losing the weight and pleasure associated with eating the pizza than the other way around. And so unless you can associate, and this is neuro-associative conditioning, which we'll get to shortly, until you can associate enough pain with being overweight and pleasure with being a healthy weight and pain with eating pizza, because you know where it's going to send you, and you get you know what I mean. It's cut and dry when you really think about it. But he's talking about these really deep underlying psychological influences that are almost never right in the face of us. It's almost never crystal clear to somebody that they'll tell you what they think they want. Mm-hmm. But they haven't associated that with enough pleasure and they don't have the moving towards and they don't have the moving away enough to get the leverage on themselves to make the decision to change. And then when emotions, or maybe they do make the decision to change, and then you get an emotional state that crops up that makes you feel a little bit more pain than you normally do. And what did you used to do when you feel more pain than you normally do? Well, I go buy a pint of Ben & Jerry's and I eat that because that makes me feel more pleasure than I'm currently feeling. And so you revert back to that. It's always about pleasure and pain relationships, according to Tony.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, I think the human nature is to feel sorry for yourself.
And he also talks about, this is an interesting quote here just in that context. He says, "You must put aside the passing moments of terror and temptation and focus on what's most important in the long term, your values and your personal standards. Remember, too, that it's not actual pain that drives us, but our fear that something will lead to pain. And it's not the actual pleasure that drives us, but our belief, our sense of certainty that somehow taking a certain action will lead to pleasure. We're not driven by reality, but how we perceive reality."
Yeah.
So it's really more about what you think will come of the actions than, the actual dopamine hit. It's not the actual dopamine hit. It's the lead up, right? So my favorite example of dopamine is slot machines. Winning is great. Winning feels amazing. It's really the moment leading up to the winning that gets you the most excited. When was the last time you played a slot machine?
Oh God, I don't even know.
I don't really care for slot machines.
Yeah, but it
very
makes
much.
sense. Yeah, sure.
But one thing that they do now is if you're going to win, you win most of your money in like a bonus round, right? So it's not like the old school where you pull the lever and if you get 3 sevens, it spits a bunch of money out at you. It's like a touch screen and it's very shiny and there's all of these new distractions that they've added in. But what happens is, okay, they're spinning. Okay, I got these 5 lions to line up, whatever, stupid gimmick it's using. So the 5 lions lined up, and that means that I get 20 free spins, and it's just going to spin on its own 20 times while I watch. And this is worth 5 times as much as a normal spin. And so I'm guessing that is by design intended to create a longer buildup to winning. The winning process is you're expecting the winnings, and you have this heightened sense of excitement because you've already kind of won. You got the 5 lions in a row. Oh, woo, I won. I've got a dopamine hit. I got the bonus round. Now I'm freaking out because I might win a bunch of money. That process could take, I'm sure there's anywhere from 15 seconds to a minute or so, through the bonus spins. And that's really what he's talking about. It's that anticipation of future pleasure or the avoidance of future pain that really drives the vast majority of our decisions.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think I think it's a more complex way of saying it, but it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And so then he goes on to talk about, from there, he goes from pain and pleasure to belief systems, because it's not about the thing that happens. It's about the meaning that you ascribe to that thing.
Yeah.
It's really, and that's the word, pain and pleasure directly tied to that, right? You could take CrossFit, for example. The vast majority of human beings would say that's terrible, and I would never want to do that. It looks like you're in a lot of pain, and I can't see why that would be enjoyable to somebody. And then a CrossFitter says, well, no, it's really as good as it gets. It's painful in the moment, but really it's the anticipation of the pleasure of being in the best shape that I can be in, of looking a certain way, of feeling a certain way, of knowing that I'm stronger than most people. It's not the pain in the moment. It's their belief about what that pain means in the long term. If you believe this pain means that I'm going to be crippled, I'm sure there are people who finish a CrossFit workout and go, oh, okay, well, I'm never going to walk again. My legs are totally gone. I must have severed my spine. There's no way that I'm ever going to be able to function. That probably wouldn't be a very pleasurable experience because of the anticipation of what that pain means long term. You could take somebody in the same amount, same type, same result pain who says, oh man, my quads are going to look so good in my short shorts this summer.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's just a mindset of the switch of, you have two ways to think about it. You can think about it one way or the other. And the one way people think about it, like you said, is they're going to look good after this, or some people are going to look the other way and say, this sucks, this is too painful. And those people, which is majority of Americans and human beings, end up in that. That's why most people don't work out, or that's why people start to work out and then they drop off. Yep. And they don't do it because of that reason.
It's about beliefs. Yeah. It's about beliefs. And, we talked about this with Stoicism. We talked about this. We've talked about this 1.5 million times. Even Stephen Covey mentions this: is the difference between the event and then your reaction to the event. So you have your circumstances, and then you have your reaction to the circumstances. And he says, that line that divides the two is your belief system. Is what do you believe about this thing? And he also argues that you can change your beliefs, or you should at least become aware of your beliefs, if nothing else. You should be able to identify them consciously, to be able to write them down and figure out exactly where you derive meaning from certain events. And I want to have another kid because blank. What does this mean to me, right? What does this mean to my family? And then what's the emotional state that drives that meaning? And to really dig down into there. But he also says, you can have some effect on the things that you believe. If you believe that money is the root of all evil, you're probably associating more pain to making money than pleasure to making money, and you may sabotage yourself and do some things to keep yourself from making it. Mm-hmm. So how do you affect a belief? How do you change a belief, or at least find one that you like instead of one that you don't like, and double down on the one that you like so that you can give it more attention? And then he talks about conviction. How much emotion do you associate with that belief? Is it strong? Is it just, I guess when this happens, it's good? Or is it like every time? Yep, 100% of the time when that happens, it's good, and it's always good, and it feels good, and I like it, and I'm going to do it anytime that I can because it's good for everybody all the time. Those are kind of opposite ends of the same, but both of those are beliefs. So how do you get yourself from the former to the latter? He says you have to create conviction, and you have to do that by starting with your basic belief, reinforcing the belief by adding new and more powerful references. For example, if you've decided you're never going to eat meat again, talk to people who are vegetarians and, find out their reasons for becoming vegetarians, and look up studies about the effect of animal protein on your body. And, and maybe I like that I don't know if he still is, but I believe he was a vegetarian when he wrote this. He may still be a vegetarian for all I remember. But his thing is like, just do a bunch of research, give yourself all of these reasons, talk to people about why they do it. And then number 3, after those two, is find a triggering event in your life. So it was like the first time I ever watched a slaughterhouse, documentary, I stopped. That was the last time that I was so triggered after watching that that I couldn't ever eat meat again without associating the eating of that meat with the slaughterhouse video. That would be what he would call a triggering event. You're associating a painful emotion, which would be disgust probably in that case, or maybe horror or fear for those animals, or sadness. You take that negative emotion and you associate it to the thing that you're trying to change or alter. So I believe that eating meat is bad. I can associate that belief to the negative emotions of the triggering event, like, watching the slaughterhouse video. And then 4, he says, just once you've got that, take action. So once you know what you're trying to believe, once you have a ton of reasons, once the logic is engaged, and then you engage the emotion as well, then, and this is kind of his hook for the whole book, is like, you have to do something about it. You can't just make a decision and then go about your business. You have to, if you make a decision, he talks about this later in the book, if you make a decision, the one thing that you have to do is take some action on that decision where and when you make it. Mm-hmm. Where and when you make you can't decide and then say, first thing tomorrow morning, I'm going to go to the gym. I decide for the rest of my life, I'm going to go to the gym 4 days a week. And if I die trying, that's what I'm going to do. And then you say, so first thing tomorrow morning, I'm going to go to the gym. Now, I'm not going to get my stuff ready. I'm not going to go out and buy new gym clothes. I'm not going to get a gym membership. Like, if you don't have a gym membership, perfect example. I decide that I'm going to start going to the gym for the rest of this year. I'm going to go 50 times between now and, December 31st. I don't have a gym membership. Perfect. I decided that this is what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to go buy a gym membership right now, because I made the decision within the same time frame that I made the decision. I mean, obviously now you can just go online and get a gym membership, and you've taken some action towards that decision. You've made it more concrete. You have the emotions, you have the logic. You're at least setting yourself up for a victory. It's not guaranteed, but you have the foundation laid to now start going to the gym more often. If you just say, I'm going to start going to the gym, I'll get a membership on my way tomorrow. Now you have all the excuse in the world when you wake up in the morning. Well, I don't have the membership, and I've got to do this at work, and I got to go through the tour and then sign the waiver. Like, all of these things are going to go through your head versus take the action and start moving.
Yeah, but what I think is, that totally makes sense to me. And one thing I always tell people, because I like to get up early, and people say, how do you do it? And I said, a lot of the mornings I don't want to get up, but the one thing that always gets me up is that feeling of after working out, and also the feeling of when I don't work out. Mm-hmm. The mornings when I don't get up, that hour later if after I wake up, I'm like, fuck, I didn't wake up. I'm like, shit, I feel like shit, versus when I go and work out, I feel good. So I always tell people, like, those feelings, that's what drives you, because you can make the decisions all day long, but most people don't follow through because they don't know what feeling they're trying to chase, because they don't know what they're after. Which is Jeff Bezos' whole thing, which I think is probably the advice I always go back to, which is the focusing on the end result. Like, what is the end result feeling that you want? And if you focus on that, you make the decision, but you need to understand what that feeling that you're trying to chase after.
Yeah, you got to get to the bottom of it and really understand it. Otherwise, something difficult's going to come up, and you're not going to have a good enough reason to overcome that difficult thing.
So before you do all that, which is what he's saying, which it's so true.
So then he goes on to talk from beliefs. He goes on to talk about Neuro-Associative Conditioning. And again, he was one of the original guys. I don't believe he's credited as one of the founders, but he's in on the ground floor of this thing called neuro-linguistic programming. Neuro-linguistic programming, I won't get into it. We don't have time, but it's basically, came out of a hypnosis school, and these guys they learned from Erickson. I can't think of his first name. Erickson is his last name. He was a hypnotist, very, very well-known clinical hypnotist, would change people's lives just by talking to them very briefly. And they studied him, and they were like, okay, well, he's doing these amazing things with people. Let's break that down. Let's write that down. Let's figure out how he's doing what he's doing. Let's try to model his behavior and distill that in a way that is able to be communicated to other. Like, I can teach it to somebody else, and I can figure out the logistics of it. So he kind of took his own route with it. He talks about NLP, but he created his own 3-letter neuro acronym. Instead of neuro-linguistic programming, he's got Neuro-Associative Conditioning, which is trademarked to him. And there's 5 steps to it. This is as deep as we can go because we've got some other things to hit. But really, if you want to condition yourself, condition your nervous system to change to the new thing that I'm this way right now. I want to be this way. I've got this thing about me that I don't like. How do I change it? 5 steps. You have to want to change. Mm-hmm. If you don't want to change, it doesn't. If there's no reason, if you don't have enough of a desire, mm-hmm. throw it out the window. You have to have leverage on yourself. So if you don't change, what will happen? Mm-hmm. If that's, well, it's not so bad anyways, then you're not going to change. If it'll be the end of the world, then you're far, far, far more likely to change. So you've got to have the desire. You have to have the leverage. From there, you have to interrupt the pattern interrupt. You have to, okay, this is habit.
Yeah,
right?
It's the power of habits.
Now it's saying, okay, so here's this thing that I'm trying to change. Here's this action that I repeatedly take that keeps me from doing the things that I want. I have to do something crazy or silly or novel or different. There has to be something in there that rattles the cage, that really gets things changed up so that you have a new perspective, right? So it's a paradigm shift for you, even just really, really minor, right? We do that on cold calls where you say something just kind of out of the blue, and it doesn't have to be something shocking, but just something that most people who are calling them aren't going to say to them, that it just catches your attention. You get out of the kind of standard operating procedure, and now you're paying a little closer attention than you were previously because, I don't know what's coming next. If that's, okay, that's interesting. It just kind of gets your attention. So you interrupt that pattern, that destructive pattern, and then this is Charles Duhigg as well. You have to replace that pattern with the good thing. So I'm trying to be this way. Right now I'm this way. I've got to interrupt the pattern that gets me to the bad thing. And then once once I've shaken things up enough there that I have the ability to do something different, now you have to immediately, like Indiana Jones, right? You've got the bag of sand, you've got the golden monkey on the thing. You take the monkey, you put the sand on. It didn't work out too well for him in that scenario, but that's the idea. You have to have something to put in its place. And then you have to condition it. From there, you have to take your time and make sure that it's happening often, and it's not a one and done, I think, is the idea. You can't just do this once and then expect that pattern to never come back. You have to condition this behavior inside of yourself, which is over weeks and months, and you have to make sure that there's reinforcement and feedback and all those good things. And then he says, after you do that, you have to do what he calls an ecology check, which is you make sure that pain is fully associated with the old pattern. This is my old pattern. It's very painful, and I've got all of this pain associated to it. You have to make sure that pleasure is associated with the new pattern. So do I have enough pain with the bad thing? Do I have enough pleasure with the good thing? You have to align all of this with your values. What do you value, which is usually states, your beliefs about what things mean, and the rules that you have for yourself, or the rules that you have within your society that you're interacting with other people. You make sure that the benefits of the old pattern have been maintained. So if there's something good that the old thing got you that's now gone, that gives you really good reason to go back to that old way of behaving. Yeah. So it's like the alcoholic who all of my friends are in the bar. Well, I've got to find some friends, because the good part about being an alcoholic was that was the only time I ever spent time with people. And so now if I'm saying, well, I'm not going to drink and I'm going to isolate myself, it's going to be easier to go find the camaraderie.
Yeah, the people who aren't drinking.
Right. So you have to have the good things, because just because the activity is bad, just because you're associating pain with it, just because it's putting you in a bad position, doesn't mean that you're not getting anything out of it.
Yeah, I think Charles Duhigg, if I'm correct, he talks about like you have the trigger or something that happens with the habit, and he says it's like a cycle. It's like the trigger happens, then you go and you take the habit, and then you get the reward. And what he talks about is like the habit itself, or what you're going to do before you get the reward, that's what you have to change. And that would be the same thing that you're talking about. Is like if you're the alcoholic, you have to take all the things that you're getting out of being an alcoholic, which is being with your friends, having fun, feeling good about yourself. Instead of that, that, maybe go work out, go hang out with friends, but find friends who don't drink, who you can have friends. So you're still getting the same reward. And that's what he's talking about. That's talks about in that book.
Certainly that's one of the things provided by Alcoholics Anonymous, is you have a group of people that you can go visit on a regular basis and have conversations with about life and try to grow with as individuals. There's definitely something to that. Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes left. There's a ton more stuff to cover here. So I'm just going to rip through a few things. We're just going to rifle through a few ideas, and it's stuff that we've talked about a lot. It's stuff that we'll continue to talk about a lot, but it's just interesting that he hits every point in this book. This book covers so much ground. Here's an area that we've talked about in the past: morning power questions.
Okay.
What do I talk to myself about in the morning that gives me the strength and the faith and the desire and the gratitude that I'm going to need to get through the day? I'll give you the questions. I'll just read them out loud and we'll let that sit for a second. What am I happy about in my life right now?
Mm-hmm.
What am I excited about in my life right now? What am I proud of today? What am I grateful about in my life right now? What am I enjoying most in my life right now? What am I committed to currently? Who do I love? And who loves me? And then in the evening, he says, what have I given today? What have I given to others today? What did I learn today? How has today added to the quality of my life? Right, so at the beginning, he's saying, what am I grateful for? Who do I love? What am I committed to? Mm-hmm. It's these kind of future projections. And then at the end of the day, just do some past questions and try to figure out what it is you've accomplished.
Well, I think the best question to wake up with is what are you most excited about? I think that's like the best question to ask. Because that should be the first thing that because everyone wakes up with, today's...
God damn it.
So instead, like when you think that, and that's okay, that's first reaction. I mean, I do that too, but then I think, what am I excited about today? I think like if there's one question I think everyone should be like, that is the question, because that sets you on the right track. I think that's like the best question to ask. It's so simple. It's so stupid, but it's so true.
So I like that. That's a really good one. I also try really hard to remain grateful. What am I grateful for?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Especially when you're down, when things are bad, when you're not feeling at your best, and you're just like, okay, let's take 2 steps backward. Let's close our eyes and say, what is it that I have that I didn't otherwise have, or other people don't have, that is just amazing.
Ancient Stoic practice of somebody else is dealing with it worse is what they would say.
Yep. So he goes from that, I'm not going in linear order anymore here. I'm just trying to jump around to hit the important points. He talks a bit about the vocabulary of ultimate success. And really, he's just talking about vocabulary and how if you have a limited way of expressing yourself, that limits the way that you feel. That the words that you have to understand the world around you describe the world around you as you understand it.
Yeah.
And if the only, and you can see this by looking into other languages, and I can't think of a pertinent example, but the idea that I'm just going to make it up, in Oobleck language, they don't have a word for fear. And so then what do you assume about those people? That they don't feel any fear. Eskimos have legendary made up idea here that Eskimos have 95 different words for snow. Well, that's important if you're an Eskimo. There's a lot of different properties of snow that if you're dealing with snow all day every day, and you make your homes out of it, and you drive on top of it, and you see it coming down mountains on avalanches, and there's a million different ways that you're interacting with snow, it's important to delineate the difference. And if snow is snow is snow, you can't describe to somebody whether or not they should drive over there, or whether or not they can make their houses out of this type of thing. It's important to delineate. And then he goes from there to talk about how you can change so it's not just having the vocabulary, but it's consciously using the right vocabulary. And he says, he gives kind of like a change this to this. I'm just going to read a couple examples here. He says, instead of saying to take this negative emotion or this negative word and change it to something either funny or kind of playful or whatever. So instead of I'm pissed off, I'm tinkled. oh man, I'm really tinkled about this.
I like that. Yeah.
Right? It's just, it
No,
keeps
it's
it
so
light.
true.
It keeps it, so I hate versus I prefer. Oh, I hate when people do that. I really prefer when this thing that I prefer.
Yeah, I mean, I try to really do that with myself. The internal conversations that everyone has with themselves. I always tell myself whenever I have a negative word, I always go back and I just think to myself, no, I can't say that. I got to go back, and then I get myself back on the right track, because it's so true. Like the words you're saying in your head too. It's like the internal conversations are actually even worse than the conversations that I think you're saying out loud to people.
He also, one that I try to use a lot, and I used, the first time I heard this, I thought it was silly, and then I started using it, and it became important, was change the word problems to challenges. It really makes a big difference, is when you're like, I don't know how we're going to fix this problem, versus,
challenge.
I don't know how we're going to overcome this challenge right now. It's like it's a different way of approaching the situation.
I would have said, years ago, if you would have told me that, I would have said, this is stupid. I would have said that word stuff doesn't make any sense. But as I get older, I realize how it's pretty incredible. It's like your coach in basketball. Don't say the word can't. We're not saying that word. Anyone says that word, they're doing laps or whatever. The whole team got to do laps. And now I'm like, oh, this is so stupid. Now
you get it.
Totally makes sense.
You get it. Yeah.
She was a great coach for saying that. That was really huge. And I now look at 20 years later, I'm like, yep, valuable. So it's pretty amazing.
Words matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's pretty funny.
The 10 emotions of power is another chapter that I want to touch. I'll just, in this chapter, I'll just rifle through these. The 6 steps to emotional mastery. You ready for these? Identify what you're really feeling. Step 2, acknowledge and appreciate your emotions. You got to know what you're feeling, and then you have to acknowledge them, and then you have to understand what they're doing for you. Right? So this is what we're talking about with those bad habits. Is if there's an emotion that if you're feeling overwhelmed, there's a reason. There's probably not, no reason for it. It's likely that emotion provides you with some benefit. Step 3, get curious about that message, that the emotion. So I'm terrified. Why? Why am I terrified? What's that trying to tell me? Step 4 is get confidence. You have to have the confidence that you can change this emotion, that you can affect it, or just that it's not going to affect you. Right? So yeah, I do feel sad today, but I'm still going to get my shit done because I'm confident in myself to be able to do that. Certain that you can handle this not only today, but also in the future, and then get excited and take action is the last step to emotional mastery. I won't talk about goal setting. He just says, set personal goals, set like toy or adventure goals or travel goals, set economic goals, and then set goals about how you can contribute to others. Mm-hmm. So he breaks those down into interesting categories there. He talks about a 10-day mental challenge. In the 10-day mental challenge, he says for 10 days, don't let yourself think any negative thoughts. And if you see yourself thinking any negative thoughts, know that you are, and sit in that for a moment and then move on. And so you recognize that you're feeling these negative emotions, and you realize that they can't affect you or your performance because you're bigger than they are, that you don't associate with them or you don't identify with them, and then you move on and you improve. And he says to do that for 10 days. And if you do that, your whole life will change. He also has the master system. This is we're quickly running out of time here, but I'll just say, so the 6 steps, the 6 master steps to change. Decide what you really want and what's preventing you from having it. What do I want? Why can't I have it right now? 2, get leverage. Associate massive pain to not changing and massive pleasure to changing. Number 3, interrupt the limiting pattern. Why can't you do this? Well, interrupt that pattern. Number 4, create a new empowering alternative. Number 5, condition that pattern until it's consistent. And then 6 is test that pattern. See if it works. See if you really can get yourself to do that. And how do you do this? How do you run that system? You manage your states. Your emotional states, your mental states, your physical states. That's going to be the baseline. Number 2, what sort of questions are you asking? What sort of questions are you asking yourself? What sort of questions are you asking for others? How are your words getting you to that? Number 3 is the values. What are you moving towards? What are you moving away? What do you not like? What are you trying to get more of? Number 4 is your beliefs about the meaning of things. Okay, so those are your values. What are your beliefs about things that, affect the way that you feel about your values? And then number 5 is your references. So what words do you use? What do you see other people doing? What do you associate with others? And so on and so forth. And then lastly, the last thing that I'll talk about is the only true route to success, the 7-day. If you want to implement what this book says, here's how you do it in 7 days. Day 1, master your emotions. Write down all the emotions that you experience.
Yeah, how you feel. Yeah,
right.
That makes sense.
Number 2, physical destiny. prison of pain or palace of pleasure? Right? Are you gonna love being in your body, or is it miserable every day? Are you going to take care of yourself or not? That one's pretty straightforward, I think. 3 is relationship destiny. Plain and simple. You got to get along with the people around you. Number 4 is finances, your financial destiny. So we've got emotions, your physical being, your relationships, your finances. Number 5 is your conduct, the way that you conduct yourself. Do you do the things that you know you should be doing? Mm-hmm. Plain and simple. You know what you should be doing to get yourself towards your values, to get your beliefs fulfilled, to make your life better. Do you do it or not? How do you conduct yourself? Number 6 is time. Day 6, work on the way that you spend your time. Measure it, understand it, think about whether or not it's the most valuable way to spend it. And then number 7, day 7, goes back to James Allen, serenity. Right? Take a day off. Appreciate, have some gratitude for yourself and for others, and relax. And it's not all about running as fast as you can all the time. If you make it to day 7, if on day 6 you really do truly take some steps to understand your time and what you're doing with it, and everything else is in place from those previous 6 days, take a second to sit back and relax and understand that you are who you are, and you're doing what you can to make yourself better, and you're trying to change yourself for the better every day that you're awake. But today, I'm just going to take a breath, and I'm going to appreciate things for the way they are, and I'm going to enjoy myself and my family and my surroundings, and I'm not going to stress out because everything's okay.
Okay, well, that about wraps up this episode of Books Are Great. Hopefully you were able to learn some tips and tricks from Tony Robbins to improve your life. If you have, tell your friends about us. We review books like this all the time, self-help, or any books around trying to improve your life. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends about us. I need to mention that the views we have expressed in this show are ours and not those of the authors, editors, or publishers we have discussed. I want to thank my co-host Joe Arco for bringing Awakening the Giant Within to our attention, and extend our gratitude to Tony Robbins for writing such a great book. Listen again to hear about yet another on next week's episodes of Books Are Great. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you soon.